Please welcome Dr. Tworp and the next panel. Thank
Hey everyone, I hope you guys have been enjoying thus far. That we're gonna move into another sector of the conversation. And I think it's such an important one because we're talking with doctors who have their boots on the ground and the patients who are participating in these trials so we can get an understanding of what that looks like. So as he said, I'm Dr. Thorpe, I'm a family physician, so I see all age ranges. And I also do a lot of patient education through my company, Amaize Health. And I've also been involved in the clinical trial process myself as an investigator. So a lot of different ways for me to hit this, right? So clinical research, as we've been talking about, has direct impact on the therapies that we prescribe. It has impact on the treatment options that we recommend. It even has impact on the diagnostic testing that we do. If you guys remember, basically the shift in age that recently occurred for testing mammograms, doing screening mammograms for patients, because we, black women, were basically not being diagnosed as much as white women with breast cancer. Or when we do get diagnosed, it's so far along in the process. So even diagnostic testing, clinical research is important for. So we need to stay focused about all the different things that really will be impacted with clinical research. And I wanted to mention this quote from the American Academy of Family Physicians. There's something called the Everyone Project. And they said, and quote, "Community engagement and advocacy for public health policy are key to advancing health equity at the societal level." And that's exactly what we're doing here today. So as we talked about before, that diversity is not just, are you black? It actually includes food insecurity, right? It includes transportation, socioeconomic status. So some of these things that we're not often thinking about, how are our patients able to get to the office for a clinical visit, much less to come in for a research study, right? So I'm gonna start off by introducing our first speaker. You guys got a taste of her before because she mentioned this when she was talking earlier. It's Dr. Orjioke, and she is, as she said before, a board-certified pulmonary disease critical care and internal medicine physician with a vast array of experience in clinical and administrative medicine. She earned her medical degree at the College of Medical Sciences, University of Calabar in Nigeria. Her early practice was first in Nigeria, and she later came to the United States and completed residency in internal medicine at St. Joseph Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. She followed that with a pulmonary and critical care fellowship at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, serving as chief resident of both and chief fellow. She also received an MBA at the Georgia Institute of Technology. She owns and runs Covenant Pulmonary Critical Care, Inc. in Atlanta, Georgia. The practice has a pulmonary division that provides inpatient and outpatient services to local and international patients. It also has a clinical research institute and provides critical services to community hospitals in the metro Atlanta area. So her focused approach and commitment to the development and implementation of hospital policies, quality assurance, and risk management programs has led her to serve in physician leadership roles in many hospitals. Her passion for medical education and mentoring led her to serve as part-time faculty with graduate medical education and internal medicine residency program here in Atlanta. So welcome, Dr. Orjioke. So our next panelist is another panelist that was here last year, also contributed a lot to the conversation between physicians and patients, and that's Dr. Nweke. Dr. Nweke is a nephrologist, which is a kidney specialist, an internist, and a public health specialist with vast knowledge and experience from training across the globe, including Nigeria, the UK, and right here in the United States. He attended the University of Lagos in Nigeria, Barts and the London Hospital in London, and Johns Hopkins School of Public Health in Baltimore, Maryland. He is the founding trustee of Rubor Foundation, Inc., whose mission is to ignite the socioeconomic framework and enhance the potential of the disadvantaged and/or underserved subpopulations and communities across the world. Dr. Nweke has been practicing medicine for more than 15 years now. He believes that no two patients are the same, and as such, every patient should have each question and issue addressed with the utmost respect and dignity that they deserve. Don't we all wish that our physicians are all like that? Welcome to Dr. Nweke. So the next the next two panel members are both patients who have participated in clinical trials. The first, we're gonna welcome Mr. Corey Lewis, and that is one of Dr. Powell's patients. This is his first time participating in a clinical trial, and so we'll find out more about that as we discuss with him. The second is a patient of Dr. Orgioke's, Mr. Stanley Wheeler. Also first time participating in a clinical trial. Welcome. So we're so thrilled to have each of these participants on stage with us today. Okay, so in order to go ahead and get the conversation started, I'm actually going to start off with the patients in this case, and I just want each of them to go ahead and tell us just a little bit about why and how they came to the decision to participate in a clinical trial.
Well, hello, my name is Corey Lewis. I am 30 years old. I am also a sickle cell warrior, sickle cell SC. And I guess you could say I'm more of an unorthodox warrior. I don't necessarily have a lot of blood transfusions like other warriors. I'm not on folic acid every day like they are, but I do have organ damage that I've had to, deal with. But I thought me moving forward, getting older, I'm like, if I don't start taking some type of initiative to figure out how I can take care of myself without always having to go to the doctor, like what are those things, what can I do? So I thought about clinical trials. Most sickle cell warriors, they're always talking about clinical trials, but they are very scared of clinical trials because we don't know. And I thought the first way for me to get past that was to start, putting myself and applying myself to it so I can be able to learn and teach others. So this was a pathway for me to get into clinical trials and show other people just like me that, you don't have
have COPD. It's a real hurtful disease. I mean, at times you literally just feel like you're dying. So I was just looking one day and I saw a study on it. I said, well, let me check it out. I called, went over, and they jumped right on it. And I'm telling you, I feel so good, okay? you know,
Awesome.
I mean, I think it was just my lifesaver. But it was just the most wonderful thing that's happened to me in a long time.
And what role would you say, Mr. Wheeler, did Dr. Orgioke play in you getting involved in this clinical trial?
Well, first of all, it was her smile and being sweet as she is. I didn't know what I was going to, but it's like, okay. I live in Decatur. They're over in which is East Point. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna make it over there, okay? If the wheels on this car roll, I'm gonna go see what's going on. And like I say, I went and they were just so nice, wasn't nobody trying to really convince me to do what I did, but I insisted that they do what they did. And it was great.
Awesome. And so I'm going to move over to Dr. Orgioke to ask, how do you typically discuss with your patients about getting involved in a clinical trial? What makes you decide to invite a patient to participate aside from the eligibility criteria?
So generally speaking, first of all, you have to understand that the patients that you would approach have to believe in you as a physician and trust you. And then the second thing is you have a conversation. I talk about informed consent. You don't just say to someone, this is what you need to do, go do it. We go through it. We have the conversation. You're struggling. You're at the end here where I honestly, as a physician, this is all I've got, right? These are the studies that are out there. These are some new things that are happening. I personally would encourage you to get involved in this. And sometimes that is 2-3 conversations. And you can see Mr. Wheeler here. We've had to bring him in sometimes to even talk to some patients that are on the fence. And I say, well, talk to him. He's gone through this. Hear his experience from a patient standpoint. And the other thing I say as well is, you say to me, I don't want to be a guinea pig. You're going to be a guinea pig either way. Either you get involved now so we can understand what this can do. You get to see me every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. You get to talk to me. I mean, and you don't have to pay to do those things, right? No copay from your insurance. If anything happens, you slip on the floor, has nothing related to the trial you're going through, you call me. Right? So you're going to get the best medical evaluation experience that you've ever had. It's almost like being in first class, but you're not paying for being in first class. So we have those conversations. Sometimes they say to me, I want you to talk to my daughter or my brother. It takes time, but I am yet to see any patient who has agreed to participate in a trial that's ever come back to me to say it was a bad experience. Every single one of them have said it's a good experience. So let's see what it does. We monitor you closely. For some people, it's the first time they ever knew they had hepatitis, because you have to run a barrage of tests to make sure it's safe for them to even get involved. So all in all, I really believe it starts with a patient-physician relationship. They know you've always done the best for them. They know that you have them at the center of your heart. It's not just about getting a new medicine out there. It's about you participating. And I say thank you every time they come in, because it takes a lot of courage to step up to the plate, to say, I'm going to be one of the first people that this is even tried on. And so I appreciate them for what they do. I make it as comfortable as possible. My study coordinators sit with them, have coffee. We learn the ones who like raspberries, the ones who like figs because they forget to wear their dentures, the ones who we just get to know them so they become a part of our family, and we do the best we can to make it a pleasant experience for them.
Thank you. And Dr. Nweke, so we were just talking about health equity, and we're mentioning getting patients into the office to get seen. And Dr. Orgioke just spoke about all the different things that they do in their office to make a patient feel comfortable when they come in to get seen. What do you do in your office typically to get patients comfortable? And what do you do also if they are someone who's on the fence about participating in a clinical trial?
Yes, thanks for that question. I agree with Dr. Ojoke. It's similar in the sense that ultimately there has to be that sense of trust, between the patient and the provider. Whether this patient is a patient who, found you online or, walked down the street, or an established patient, that level of trust has to be built. We are known for providing, to have listening ears, as a practice. We spend time with the patients, listen to them, it's surprising that, you can imagine that, when you go to certain situations where, you have to be in and out 15 minutes, 15 minutes is never enough. For my practice, especially, dealing with a lot of sick patients, chronic patients, as a nephrologist, it takes more than 15 minutes to review the medicines. Yeah. So that's just one of those things that we do differently. I usually instruct my patients to bring their medicine bottles, and 10 out of 10 times, my staff is there, there's always errors. I don't care how much list you have in the EHR or whatever, there's always errors, in those medicines. Half the medicines you prescribe is not what you have, and vice versa. So those extra things, is what we have found to help build, trust, build good relationships with our patients. But at the same time, there's always going to be, that resistance from some quarters in terms of, I don't want to be the guinea pig. Someone else can do that. But to Dr. Ojoke's point, ultimately, you're still going to be, because if you're taking medicines that have not been tried amongst our community, you're still part of, some form of trial, phase 4, like Dr. Aquino has said. So the fact that you're consuming medicines, you're still part of, a post-marketing, trial that's still going on even after it's been approved. And if you are not part of it at the beginning, it doesn't help us as a community towards the end. And then finally, for patients who have a little bit of resistance, irrespective of whatever relationship they built, it's really just more education, providing them, either the informed consent or a brochure, take home, research more, provide them with links to websites, do more research, discuss with family. More often than not, half the patients will still come back, okay, I've talked to my spouse, my children, as the case may be, and then they will enroll. For some other reasons, for some other patients, it might just be, work. That's usually a big problem, having to commit to a trial based on work schedules. Some patients work at night, and so things like that. So those are the few situations where, even whether with interests, we still see some challenges in our community.
Thank you. And so just as you mentioned, whether it be taken off from work in order to participate in a trial or whatever is going on in the home, I'm going to direct this question to you, Mr. Lewis. You participated in an inpatient clinical trial. So can you talk to us about what the process of that looked like for you? And was it a challenge in terms of having to take off from work, or how did it kind of impact your home life in terms of your decision making?
I could definitely say Dr. Vincent and Tayo probably could, they could say they had some trouble trying to get me into the office a few times, but that was because of work. And a lot of times too, it was like, well, do I have enough gas to get there? Can I get there? And then for that weekend, it wasn't an issue for the weekend. I didn't mind staying over, but I did in my back of my head, I was like, okay, well, you know, I need to start putting things aside just so I'm good for that weekend to stay. So I think it's just making sure you communicate in advance. I think that was the biggest help for me.
Got it. And Mr. Wheeler, you participated in outpatient trial. So for those of you who may not know the difference, an inpatient clinical trial means the patient is staying in-house, kind of like a hospital stay. And then the outpatient is just as if you were going to the doctor to be seen. You have specific visits that you go into the clinic to get seen. So, Mr. Wheeler, you participated in an outpatient trial, and you said that you live in Decatur and had to go to East Point. What challenges did you encounter trying to get to those visits to make sure that you were compliant during the study, and how was the office helpful in mitigating those?
Okay, after almost killing myself a couple of times on that highway trying to get over there, you know, I can't have CK here, you know, pretty bad there. But anyway, they started offering me an Uber, which was the greatest thing. I felt spoiled. I felt just really taken care of, you know. Just call an Uber, you know, and they'll call me in the morning. What time you want us to send your ride? Okay, so not even have to be in at any certain time, you know what I'm saying? So you always feel better when you have running stuff, you know. And they're just some of the best people over there, I'm telling you. It's like going over there, I'm going to hang out with my sisters, you know. We just giggle, I'm in everybody's business, saying bye, you know. But at the same time, we're taking care of business. And yeah, I do like the coffee. And at times I can turn the television, you know, depends on who's up front. But it's been a real pleasant experience. And my thing is, every time I see somebody in there, I'm trying to figure out if they're in there for the same reason I am. Because anybody that hits that door and wants to inquire about the, you know, trial, I'm there to tell them, hey, you need to try it, you know. I mean, it's nothing like it. I've spent so many nights and days in the hospital just, you know, thinking, okay, well, God, is this next one going to be the end or whatever, you know. And now I'm looking for another day, okay. Let's do it again, you know. So I just like it. You know, I can't say enough about them. I cannot say enough.
Okay, thank you for that. So I wanted to kind of bring in more of the health equity conversation into this, which is, it was brought up before, about, you know, if we were to see on the prescription bottle how many patients were participated in a trial from each population, what would likely happen, in my opinion, or at least for the patients that I've had, many of them would say, well, I'm not taking this, right? How, for both of you, Dr. Orjioke and Dr. Nweke, how do you typically deal with patients that are not trusting of the medications that you're prescribing, not in the clinical trial setting, but when you are practicing clinically, that they're not trusting the medicines that you're prescribing? How do you explain to them the benefit of taking it when you may or may not know if it was tested in our populations accurately?
Unfortunately, when there's lack of data, you just have to go with how the patient does with the medicine. So I'll give you an example. The long-acting beta agonist with the long-acting corticosteroids, right? You have Symbicort, you have Advair, you'd be shocked how a patient will not respond to one, but the moment you switch them, they respond to another one. True story. I have a patient, and this is more with my young asthmatics, my brown and black young men who are asthmatics, and when I say young, between the ages of 21 to 35, they're macho men. So, we don't need to be taking this kind of stuff. We have an asthma attack, we go to the ER, they give us a few puffs, and off we go until the next attack, and that attack ends them in the emergency room on the ventilator, and then suddenly the light bulb goes on that asthma is a real disease. He has a friend that takes Ventolin, so when his insurance won't pay for the albuterol, he will pay his friend to go see the doctor to say, I am having difficulty with my breathing. They give him a prescription, and he takes that prescription from his friend and fills it and uses it. So that's just real life world, because you respond to one, you don't respond to the other, but they're all meant to be colas: Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Shasti. They're all colas, but everybody has a preference. It's the same thing with the lungs. So what you're saying is real, but until we have that data on the bottles, you just have to do trial and error. If this is not working, let's see if this one will work. And if this one works, that's what we're going to stay with. And when insurance doesn't pay for it, unfortunately, they go on the streets and get it some way, somehow, because this is what works for me, and this is what helps me breathe.
Very, very true. Dr. Nwiko?
Yes, certainly. It's been said multiple times. We all respond differently to medications, and there are genetic reasons, there's social reasons, there's community reasons why we may or may not respond to certain medicines. And literally in every specialty, whether it's nephrology or cardiology or endocrinology, you'd find medicines that would not respond to a certain group of people or a certain patient. And my experience is the same. If you try one, it doesn't work, you try another one. But to the point that has been said over and over again is, if we had enough representation in these trials, then the frequency of the trial and error would reduce, because we would know what agents or what compounds would meet the needs of certain demographics. So certainly, it still comes down to the fact that it just needs to be appropriate representation in participation in clinical trials.
I'm going to go back to the patients for a second. I just want you to speak to the audience to let them know if you had any complications during the process, with whether it be the treatment regimen that you were receiving, and how was that dealt with? I know for you, Mr. Wheeler, you said that you've been treated wonderfully.
It's been great.
But if there's any specific things that happened during the course of the trial that kind of came up that had to be addressed, and how it was addressed, and how it made you feel moving forward.
I haven't had any issues. Even from the first, dose of medication that I took, it's just, it's hit and go, you know what I'm saying? So I think the longest part about it is waiting to see if I have a reaction. But nothing, it's good. It's good.
How about you, Mr.
So for me, it was the blood issue. Giving the blood, I was a hard stick in some cases. So that was like a big issue for me. And then to continue to have to do that like every 3-4 hours, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little frustrated with it, because, consistently getting poked. I did tell myself that maybe if there was a better way of doing this, maybe this will be a reason for people to come in to do more clinical trials, because they know if they have to continuously give that, giving blood, there should be some type of IV or something putting that back in, if that makes sense. So I just think, it was great, a great experience, but that was one thing that I did feel like I don't ever want to have to do that again if I do this again.
And so not only is participation in clinical trials at the patient level necessary, it's necessary for physicians to get involved also. Now, I'll speak for myself. In medical school, I did a lot of research, but it was not clinical research usually. I was one of the few that got involved in clinical research pretty early on, but it was something that I sought out. It's not something that we typically talk about. And so I don't think a lot of us have the understanding that we can participate in clinical trials in this way, meaning most people coming out of academia feel that, oh, you just have to write grants to the FDA for funding. But the way that our clinicians here are practicing, I just want them to speak to that a little bit. And what would you say to encourage other physicians that are just starting out? How do they get involved in the process? Because they may not know.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Right. Yes. My story is somewhat similar. You know, I didn't really have any sort of focused clinical trial training going through medical school or residency or fellowship beyond the usual posters and a couple of papers here and there. But I obviously saw that there was a need, and I did eventually was passionate about representation and equality. And when I started to look at this data, which is publicly available, it became clear that obviously that we needed to do something. And that's how I got involved. And believe it or not, I was introduced to Dr. Akinola, and he was someone I would call and say, hey, tell me about this process, that process, and I started to learn about how to set up a team, where to go to look for these usually industry-sponsored trials by pharmaceutical companies, and taking some online courses, getting some basic training, GCP, hiring a consultant to train the staff and get us ready to be able to conduct these trials. And over the years, we have, developed a team. We found it, and just not just me, but the staff. I found it very engaging part of the practice. It's patients who are involved really enjoy doing it. They get, like has been said, first class care. The reasons why there are trials is anything can happen. You can have adverse events. You can have, and that's why there are trials. We're looking for safety and efficacy. So, I think we should state it here that things can still go wrong, and that's why it's a trial. But the way that these trials are designed is such that when things go wrong, they are picked up on time and addressed. But to your question is to also to continue to get other colleagues, to not just have them refer patients to you, but also get them involved in providing this as a service to their patients. And I think it's just one other physician at a time. And that's what we're doing.
I would say, how do you, I'll put it to Dr. Orji, how do you then encourage other practitioners, really, this is a forum of doing it, but in what other ways do you encourage other practitioners to really get involved? Because sometimes it can be a really daunting process if you don't have a Dr. Akinola to ask. Mm-hmm. How do you make yourself available so that people can learn kind of how to go about it?
So my experience was not a very pleasant one. It was pretty much like it used to be in residency and fellowship. You show up the first day and they throw you into the water and you sink or swim. That's how my experience was. And because of that experience, I now, and we had a summit at our practice about a week ago, and I had about 3 or 4 physicians who joined us online, and it was like 9 to 12, just talking about the clinical trials experience. And I decided that I was actually going to put a program together because it's not easy. So let's just start out there. It's like you going out to start a practice. You have to take care of billing. You have to have your Amaize. You have to look at how you're going to do the marketing. So if anyone says to you, oh, it's an easy process, no, it's not. They're not telling you the truth of the matter. It is not an easy process, but you have to have a structure in place. And so those who have come to me, I've said to them, we have to sit down and actually have a discussion so you have a structure in place. Because the first thing is, as PI, as a principal investigator, you have responsibilities that have to be taken care of. Most physicians run away from private practice and outpatient practice because of the paperwork. There will be paperwork. You're going to have to decide in investing, am I going to invest in an electronic system or am I going to do paper? If you do paper, you're going to have the capacity at your site to store paper. Then you have to have a negative, what's the difference between a negative 20 and a negative 70 fridge? I don't know. Until I got into clinical trials. I didn't know there was a difference. A 3,000 rev centrifuge and a 1,000 rev centrifuge, there is a difference. I didn't know that. And then when you've done all of that, you have to understand about having a clinical research coordinator. What's the difference between that and a research assistant? When a clinical research, when they come to audit or look at your books, what are they looking for? What's an ICF? I did not know. I am a physician, but I did not know because every industry is different. All right, they say, okay, the sponsor will give you money. Oh, we're going to give you $10,000 for a patient. Ooh, lots of money. No, it's not. Because you have overheads. You have to pay your clinical staff. You pay electricity. You have to have lease. Your space has to be in a certain way. Those patients have to stay in the study. Someone has to call them to encourage them. Someone has to sit with them. There's so much that goes into it. Now, I went to school and got an MBA because when I started my practice, I did not know about money. Nobody teaches you about money in medical school. We just heard about health equity and social determinants. Nobody teaches you that. They give you a stethoscope. They teach you biology, pathology, but they don't tell you have to pay your bills. They don't tell you that bit, and no one teaches you about that. So I went to get an MBA because I was growing a practice, and I truly did not know what to do. I knew I saw 20 patients today, and I billed for it. Who's going to collect my charges from the insurance company? It's the same thing with the clinical trials. You send an invoice to your sponsor. Somebody has to follow that money up. Otherwise, when it's time to pay your research coordinators, there's no money in the bank. So you also have to decide which trials are you going to take. You have to go out there and find participants for the trials. The inclusion-exclusion criteria, by the time you're done, you may screen 60 people to randomize one. Nobody tells you that. So when they approached me, I said, I'm going to be honest and real with you. This is what it is. You have to have some sort of business model. How do you want to run your business model? What kind of trials are you going to do? What combination? How many research coordinators do you need to run 5 trials? What's that day going to look like? What is your profit and loss statement? Do a budget. You have to sit down and think about those things. When there's an SAE, you have to report it within 24 hours. I didn't know that going in. You know, and they give you a manual that's like 200 pages. And you do that for 5 studies. That's in addition to running your practice. All right, so am I enjoying it? Absolutely. Is it exciting? Absolutely. It's nice to be on the cutting edge of the new things that are happening, but you also have to sit down and count the cost and sit down and think through it and get someone who knows what they're doing so that you're not sinking and swimming to be able to get into it. That's my advice. So I actually told myself in the next 6 months, I'm going to put a program together that allows for people to ask these questions and look at your site and look at what you need to truly start something, keep it going. Again, I don't say we're disadvantaged, we're challenged. because there are not a lot of us out there doing it. So it kind of limits the exposure you have and who you can do. But you need to sit down and talk to someone. Don't let someone come to you and say, oh, you just need to be my PI. And then it's like, yeah, let's go be PI or somebody. And then somebody comes with this ton of paperwork. You need to sign. Oh, I'm signing. So it's an exciting world. As much as we want our patients to get involved, I encourage physicians that are of color to get involved in trials. Some people, it becomes their exit strategy from practice. They end up just doing trials, and it truly is exciting. It truly is. But you have to be realistic as to the goals you're setting, and you also have to be realistic as to what you need to get into it and to do it well. I hear it a lot from the CRAs that come to my site, that one of the things that sponsors have issues with is that the black and brown sites, our data integrity is not what it should be. We spend days, weeks responding to queries. Those are the kind of things they track. So whenever they come, they look at us with a microscope because the expectation is that this site is not going to meet standards because of this, this, and this. So I've heard it from a lot of the CRAs that we have. So if you're going to run a site and run it well, I think you should sit back, do your homework well, look at what you really want out of the site, and talk to people, so that when you're doing it, you do it right.
Thank you for that. So just for the sake of, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any questions from the audience or from online.
And just to add to what Dr. Ojoke said is, for intending and investigators, if you get started, don't start with 5, please. Start with 1.
That's great advice.
So, Emmanuel Odemene, I'm a nephrologist. Great discussion so far. I've learned a lot. And having lived through COVID with so much controversies around vaccines, I know one of the requirements to get into studies, to get people enrolled, is to, get them vaccinated against pneumonia, meningococcal vaccine. How do you navigate patients being resistant to being vaccinated to get into trials?
Okay, so for me, it still boils down to this thing about trust. And so remember, you can, at least for me, if you're starting out with a trial, I think like maybe a blood test kind of trial, not the one where you have to do all these multiple procedures and stuff that you're not used to. But it's still that same conversation, because if you have a patient, as a nephrologist, if you have a patient that has end-stage renal disease on hemodialysis, pneumonia vaccine and flu shot is meant to be part of their treatment anyway, right? Routine treatment, nothing to do with trials. So you start there, because if you can't get your patients to do their routine care, how are you going to get them to do something they've never seen or felt or whatever before? So it still boils down to the trust. So you are not getting vaccinated because of the trial. You're getting vaccinated because that's good medicine and good care. That just happens to be one of the things you need for the trial. So that's how I would start it. This is what you need just because you have end-stage renal disease and you're hemodialysis. However, if you choose to be in the trial, it happens to be one of the things that are required.
And we're going to go.
Make sure you get it. Hi, my name is Elaine. It's so wonderful to be here to hear this discussion, because I've been in the industry for a long time, and just like Dr. Ellis says, you go in the room, it's just you in the room. So I'm super excited to be here. I want to say to the patients, thank you so much for participating and for sharing your story. I think it's very impactful. And I forgot your name, but one of the things I would suggest to patients if they want to participate in clinical trials, definitely ask those hard questions. So like you said, for you, you felt like having all those blood draw was overbearing. And when we talk about the informed consent, pay attention, listen, read the informed consent, because it does tell you you're going to do. And as a patient, you might not know, but those are some of the things, if you're considering participating in clinical trial, you want to look at the informed consent. It's going to tell you blood might be drawn every 4 hours. And so you can have that conversation. Could they put in an IV line? For some trials, they probably can, but for some trials, they probably can't. And the other thing I wanted to say to the physicians in the room, I think when we look at clinical research, we also have to think about it as a continuation of standard of care, right? Offering it as a treatment option or an option for our patients before they get to the point where they feel like there's no other option. So I think for the physicians who are wondering, where do I start? How do I start? When you have your patients, they're on 6, 7 medication, you're trying to manage them, you're just having a hard time, think of clinical research as a continuation of care.
Thank you for that. And
Can I just say something real quick? I heard what you said, the informed consent part, and this is the part where I feel like I hear it from a lot of different sickle cell patients. We understand the informed consent, but I do think a lot of times it's different when you're actually in the process of doing it, and that is where I experienced it. I understood my informed consent, and I felt like I had a lot of meaningful conversations with Dr. Vincent, but I also do feel like me in that moment and experiencing it myself, that's when I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. You see what I'm saying? And that's the part that a lot of folks don't have. They don't have that, oh, I get it, because you're just reading and you're just listening to someone. But when you actually have to go through that, it was different. You know, I didn't know how to take that. When I had to go home, I was trying to figure out how I'm supposed to get my blood cells back up, you know? Do I need to eat some more food? So I think that's I just wanted to point that out. What you said was a great point, but when you have to deal with it yourself, it's different.
And I just wanted to make one point, and we can take one more question. If you are an employed physician, please read your contract before getting involved in a clinical trial, because your contract may tell you that you are not permitted to participate without the say-so of the organization that you are working for. So typically, if you are in private practice, you get the ability to make that decision for yourself. But if you are employed, check your contract. Okay, last question.
Hi. First of all, thank you for everyone sharing your story and your experience with being involved in clinical trials. So I know there's been a push for like decentralized trials and making it more accessible for the patient to participate in clinical trials. So I was just curious, for the trials that you all have participated in, have there been an aspect of telemedicine or home health visits, and how has your experience been with it, or like what your outlook on that, moving towards a DCT type of like framework?
So from a physician standpoint, and this is, they offer it, it's offered. So one of the trials that we have is a subcutaneous injection with the option of the patient being able to give it to themselves at home. They also gave the option of home health but for me and my patient population, there were two things. One is them coming in to the office allowed for me to build a relationship. And so it was a shared decision. They preferred to come in so that we would have that time when we talk about what your daughter is doing, how the guy that you're living with is, what's going on. So for them, it was more than just a trial. They were becoming part of a community and a family. So whenever the option came up, they still preferred to come in. But it was given to us as an option. But for my patient population, they preferred to come in to be a part of the trial than having someone they didn't know or whatever come to the house to kind of take care of them. The new trial we're getting involved with asthma, instead of having in-house spirometry, we're actually having off-site spirometry, and it's just being tried for the first time. So that they will come in and we'll do a dummy. So they will do that spirometry in one of the rooms. We will be in the other room to make sure it's done right. So that option is being made available. And of course, we've talked about AI and things like that. So I think going forward, we will continue to do that. But for you starting out early and you knowing your patient population, I think you as a clinician have to make the decision. Is this something they can do tele or is it something that they have to come in for? I have patients that live Columbus, Georgia. Oh, you can do telemedicine for the next visit. No, I'm coming in. They will drive those hours to come in. And then I have one that lives down the road. No, Dr. Ojoke, I'll see you on the phone. So it's preference. It's preference.
While this is a great conversation, and I appreciate all the questions and the panelists, in the interest of time, we're going to have to end. So any additional questions we can ask offline. Thank you again. Thank you both for participating in trials. We so appreciate your contribution. And thank you both physicians for participating again.
Thank you.